Low back pain, does it originate in the low back or is it related to something else? One of the terms I like, anchor and exhaust, that I learned through some of my trainings is the exhaust is often where you're feeling that pain, but how is that anchored and where is that pain originating from? Our low back is one of the most vulnerable areas because we lose the thoracic cage and then we don't have the hips. We've got the spine there to protect, but we're really not supposed to be twisting through the lumbar in the way we most often do. We want some twist to be able to come from the thoracic cage as well as from the hips. We want to protect a strong and stable lumbar spine, which is often not given what it's needed in our 90-degree chairs that don't actually support good posture or body mechanics from the lumbar spine. I'm saying that to say, let's talk about lacrosse ball rolling, the hips and glutes. So when I say the hips and glutes, here is an example where we're looking, this side has the glute max in there covering the entire hip. This has a cutout where you can see a lot more of here the glute med, glute min, a lot of the lateral rotator stuff, and one of the very important ones here, your sacrotuberous ligament connecting from off of the tailbone to your sits bone. When that's seized up, it can throw off the entire hip structure, throw off these SI joints, and create a lot of dysfunction, even if it's just a couple degrees of things being off in the hips. That can be changing how you're walking and really affecting your back. And also that can be coming because of what's going on in the back or in the feet, but this is an area where things can be rooted and stuck. Now, to speak on this being a Disney photo, meaning a photo drawn by someone with more awareness, because this is again from an old version of Anatomy Trains, but this is not a very good representation of what an iliac crest tends to look like. They tend to have a bit more of an arch towards the top here, and the variation and difference in hips from one person to another is just as much as our faces. So if you look at a skull without any skin, you wouldn't be able to tell much difference, but once we layer on all of the tissues, the muscle, the skin, and everything else, we all look quite a bit different. So the same is true for our hips, and know that yours are unique to you, and most of all, how do they feel and what's going on, and how can you work with what's going on to create some more space in there. So what I'm going to show momentarily is how to take the lacrosse ball and focus on what I like to call the 2 U's, which is working on the horseshoe of from the ASIS at the front of the hip up and around the iliac crest, down along the sacrum and down across the sacrotuberous ligament, and then can work all around this sits bone as well. And then the other is from the bony prominence from the femur, which comes up and has this greater trochanter here, and then the acetabulum actually seats into the hip here. The other U is on that lateral side around the greater trochanter. So taking the lacrosse ball and getting it set along that belt line where your glute min and med are, is where a lot of low back pain is. I prefer to go on the ground because it's just a lot easier. So you can take the lacrosse ball, make sure you have your hip located, and just simply sit down or lay down on that area. I'm supported on an elbow, have another hand behind me to support, and press up on there the more you need to decrease the weight, and just slowly roll. If an area is super intense, don't just roll over it, don't move quicker, and don't avoid it. Go with the amount of pressure that you can take and move as slowly as you can to get that tissue to shear. So from this one spot just along the top of the iliac crest, which is usually at the belt line and slightly above, working through all of that tissue, it can be incredibly intense, one of the most sensitive areas. But if you're doing this work on your own, you're going to get a lot of improvement in function for your hips and your low back, and get much greater progress when you come in for a massage. So you can spend several minutes just on this spot alone, and I'm left leg, foot planted in with the knee bent, right leg extended out. You can bring that right leg, which is where the lacrosse ball is, in and out. I can clamshell the leg open and closed to get some engagement into the tissue, to feel what's firing and what's having trouble in the area. You work that area for a few minutes, then you can move on to another of within that U. Now I'm starting at the top of the sacrum and working down slowly. I'm moving 10 times faster than I would if I were just doing this for myself, but I want to slow down because it feels really good right now. So working down along the line of the sacrum, letting the tissue melt and open up as you move along. As you get down towards the bottom of the sacrum, you can either just follow what line of tension you have there. I just got to twitch all the way down hamstring and calf. It's most about feel. Knowing the anatomy supports being more productive because you can connect the intellectual to the kinesthetic of what's happening, but most of all feeling what's happening, breathing, not tensing the area and allowing things to relax is what's going to allow things to change the most. So that's getting down along the line of the sacrum, adjusting now so I can find the edge of the sacrum to the tailbone towards the sits bone to get that sacrotuberous ligament, and in time I'll make better quality videos that have supported imagery that are showing the muscles and the areas. Right now this might only work for those that are auditory kinesthetic and can see what I'm saying by description, but most of all by feel is what matters. And if you give the time to yourself to do this, you will find the benefits just from doing so. So now I'm again working towards the sits bone from the bottom of the sacrum, just trying to open up that sacrotuberous ligament. Now rolling over the sits bone a little bit and just letting that work all the way past the sits bone out to the greater trochanter, that bone that you feel as maybe the hip bone that's on the side of your thigh is really the edge of your femur before it jets into the hip itself. So now I'm on the back side of the greater trochanter, just rolling down towards the foot and back up nice and slow. And to get that U, I'll need to turn sideways, get all the way down, lateral, and very slowly and mindfully move around that line from the greater trochanter back towards the front of the ASIS. That is the front of the hip, the little prominence you have there where one of your quads actually starts. So that's a lot of information and a lot to focus on, but you can spend 30-40 minutes on a single hip here easily. If you have any questions, please let me know. Find yourself some anatomy as reference, and one of the things I find most useful as the anatomical reference is like a trigger point app. There's one that's $2 or $3 and it shows you where the trigger points are for each muscle, which usually ends up being origin and insertion and somewhere right in the middle of the belly, but it gives you good reference of things to focus on. Those trigger points can be the places where a lot is locked up and held, and by focusing on that area you can activate a referral pattern, which is just sensation in another area. Those are good things to bring up and things you want to stay on that spot until that dissipates. That's a lot of the things that we're doing here when we're practicing functional myofascial body work to create the space for the tissue to start shifting and changing. So I encourage you and implore you to take the time to use the lacrosse ball. If you have low back pain, if you have hip pain, if you have any pain at all, take the time to allow yourself to get a bit of relief and release through taking your time, breathing, feeling what's intense, and allowing things to shift. Thanks so much.